In the early 2000s, a shift occurred in the gaming scene with first-person shooters. Fanciful, linear, and totally action-oriented games were being supplemented by more realistic, grounded releases that tended to be more spacious and dynamic in their level design. The tactical shooter genre cemented itself with Ghost Recon and Operation Flashpoint, but in 2000, Project I.G.I laid the groundwork for titles like Farcry and Crysis by giving players huge levels and an authentic flavour to the gameplay. It's a pretty solid FPS, with a bunch of great ideas let down by the roughness of its production and some bad game design. In Project I.G.I, you play as David Jones, an ex-SAS commando working for the Institute for Geotactical Intelligence, whose task to track down a rogue nuclear warhead in Eastern Europe. You're supported by Anya, who relays your objectives between missions and on the fly. There's fairly minimal interaction between them, which isn't very good when they're the only characters in the entire game. And that's the entire plot. There's no twists or surprises or any actual depth. When a villain appears, it's more like, oh, okay, so they could actually afford more than 2 voice actors. Well, sort of. Outside of cutscenes, all in-mission dialogue is purely text-based, which just comes off as very cheap and half-assed. This almost non-existent story isn't why you're playing I.G.I, as the gameplay redeems it. Gone are the cramped industrial warehouses and office buildings of the past. It's the wide open wasteland that makes up the far-flung corners of Eurasia. Perhaps Wasteland is unfair, with some nice weather effects and impressive vistas showing off the decent, if blurry, textures. It definitely captures the setting. Just kidding, you do a fair share of warehouse searching and office clearing, as that's what most missions require. You have a single base or multiple installations that need to be infiltrated for some such purpose. Within them, you'll scour the area for information and clear it of any threats. Most just involve securing a vehicle or activating a terminal. I.G.I's level size can be huge and easily dwarf its contemporaries, with the one loading screen containing towns, train stations, military bases, and enemy guards and vehicles. For a lot of games, it's simple to create realistic looking levels. It's another such thing to model the entire map and how it would actually be laid out. I.G.I goes for the latter route by making you actually work to enter the levels proper. Enemies have assigned barracks where they will rush out if the alarm is raised. Larger central buildings frequently have basements with elevators, and warehouses contain numerous supplies and items. After some time, you'll start to notice the copy and pasted nature of the game's assets. Buildings and their interiors don't differ much, with the exception of a few levels. However, it can really feel like you're exploring an actual disused Cold War era base instead of some corridors slapped together. Even if it's just as linear, because while gazing across the cold, towering mountaintops, there's only one way to infiltrate the levels. But that path will be covered with many shell casings, as by infiltrating I really mean killing everything that tries to point a gun at you with a sizable selection of firearms. Most ops have you starting with a silenced MP5 and a Glock, but you can pick up AKs, spaz shotguns, and Uzis of fallen soldiers. There's more infrequent items like sniper rifles, D-Eagles, and M16s. Each are modelled and sound just fine, with a really nice mechanical effect to each weapon. I.G.I definitely goes for the realistic angle by having actual ballistics. Spraying away at enemies is going to get you nowhere fast, encouraging more short control bursts out of the player, which for 2000 was something very, very different. There's also bullet penetration in the game, which as you'd imagine is fucking awesome. Wooden doors and walls where an enemy may hide behind doesn't mean much when you can pepper them from the other side. But this also works in their favour too, putting a bit more thought into your own cover. Some moderation is recommended however, as most bases have security cameras and an alarm system. You want to get the drop on the enemy first, so if the alarm system sounds and you see dozens of enemies rushing towards you, your chances of success drop dramatically. Of course, if you pick up a jackhammer, you basically win, as everything dies instantly thanks to its absurd rate of fire and damage. The enemies themselves do get progressively tougher and better equipped, with even armor units entering the fray requiring some heavy ordnance. So the gunplay can be fun, but Project I.G.I has a lot of warts, starting with getting killed. It's reasonable in this kind of game that you're fragile against direct gunfire, but it's not so clear cut. You'll have enemies unloading clips into you meters away whilst you only sustain slight damage, avoiding most of the bullets. Other times, those same enemies will fucking drop you at full health instantly. This will happen a lot. You'll avoid damage before suddenly dying and seeing mission failed into the screen. I.G.I's guns seem to have an inherent inaccuracy. I get it, realism and all, but firing an AK or an M16 shouldn't result in a spray of bullets all over the place if you dare go full auto. Strangely enough though, shotguns are absolutely deadly, with their range being equal to that of a rifle, making them great in all operations. And it's not like the enemy AI is smart, quite the contrary, they're dumb as a stump. As long as an alarm isn't sounded, you can clear out an entire room with an LMG for 0 reactions from the guards the room over. There's attempts at some interesting tactics like enemies ducking to the ground after being shot at, but usually they beeline to you. In the last few missions of the game, the difficulty ramps up significantly, with precision marksmen that will annihilate you before they even properly materialize into the maps, essentially being invisible. But why am I bitching about all of this? Because of I.G.I.'s most frustrating and egregious flaw: 0 saves and mid-level continues. It doesn't matter what you've done or how far you've come, getting unlucky or just getting blindsided has you starting all the way back. This turns great sections of the game into trial and error bullshit. We have to memorize where each and every enemy is, especially on the later levels where turning a corner can really fuck you up. This makes the game very repetitive and boring. We just trek slowly across mountains before getting killed and doing it all over again. Ah, fuck. It all culminates into a ball-bustingly hard final level that goes on and on and on and on, made worse with the glitches and vicious damage inflicted on you. Then it has the goal to throw in an escort objective. It is fucking brutal and an overall shitty conclusion. I.G.I.'s enjoyment just fluctuates so drastically, it's very frustrating to properly critique it, as there are genuinely great moments peppered throughout the annoying bullshit. The openness to the environments and sense of authenticity are very compelling reasons to keep playing beyond seeing the earlier steps of modern tactical shooters. If you can find a copy on the cheap, it's worth it. However, those unwilling to deal with its at times unfair difficulty and numerous hiccups can probably avoid this one.